We've reached the end. This will be the last set of lectures that I post. The goal is to talk about a couple more what we think of as neurodegenerative diseases. I'll cover multiple sclerosis and ALS today, which is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. I'll talk about those diseases a little bit. The textbook doesn't have great coverage of them, so I brought in a bunch of things from other resources. First, I want to cover what the exam will look like a little bit, though, first. As it stands now, the exam is scheduled for Wednesday. That's a week from today. And if you notice on your syllabus, it says Exam 3 and Cumulative Final. And so those are separate exams, and they work like this. Everyone will have to take Exam 3, right? It'll be on Joule. And then you have the option of taking the fourth cumulative final exam. Okay, so like I said, it's cumulative. It's going to cover everything we've done throughout the semester, but it cannot hurt your score. So the idea is whatever score that you have out of the four that's lowest, right? Exams 1, 2, 3, and the cumulative, whichever one of those is lowest gets thrown out. So if you get a 12% on the cumulative, that gets thrown out. But say you did poorly on exam 2 and you can do better on the cumulative, I would throw out the exam 2 score. Okay. So on Wednesday, right, what you'll see in Joule, hopefully, is that two exams will show up. One will be exam 3, which is going to cover everything from chapter 8 and the neurodegenerative diseases we've been talking about. And then one will be that cumulative exam, which will span the entire semester. You don't have to take them at the same time, right? You're welcome to take the third exam at 11 in the morning and excuse me, and finish it by 11:30, and then maybe you want to come at 5 p.m. and take the cumulative exam and finish that by 5:30 or something like that. That's fine. Once you start an exam, you have to finish that exam in that sitting. So you can't pause halfway and then take a break, okay? What else? The exams, right? Open notes, open book. So, there's no way that I can police people using or not using those resources. So if you want to use your notes or your textbook, feel free. Though what I would say is this cannot take the place of studying, right? I think that if you've ever done these open notes, open book type things before, I think what you find is that students who are the best prepared use those resources the most fleetingly, right? They use them very little. So if you're constantly referring back to the textbook, I think that would suggest that you're not certain of the information. And I want to make this exam really about how well you know the information and not how well you can look up information in a textbook or in your notes. So in that light, what we're going to do is the exam will be all multiple choice. So I hope to build a 50-question multiple choice exam with a tight timer. Right, so the student doesn't have an opportunity to look up every single thing, right? Which again isn't really testing your knowledge; it's testing how you can look something up in a book. So rather than expanding the time and changing the format, I'm going to tighten up the time a little bit, make it all multiple choice, but allow you to use your textbook. Okay. Other things with respect to the exam. You'll have to complete the exams on that Wednesday. I want to say it's the 6th, Wednesday the 6th. So at some point during that day, you'll have to complete them. They'll be late and you can't do them on the 7th. So do them right away on the 6th or sometime on the 6th. If you have questions on the format of the exam or that's you're super stressed out about it or something like that, let me know and we can have a conversation. But that's kind of how I envision it right now. What else did we want to talk about? There'll be another quiz that'll go up on Friday, and I shouldn't say quiz, right? It'll be like a concept check that'll cover the things that we talked about this week. So look for that. It'll be up on Joule. It'll be, again, 10 multiple choice questions just to gauge how well you're doing. So we'll start by talking about multiple sclerosis today, right? And multiple sclerosis, or MS. Whoops. MS is a thought of probably if you were to ask what do you think of, most people would say it's a demyelinating disorder, and that's somewhat true. We'll talk about that. So the myelin gets broken down because the oligodendrocytes are dying. Okay, the symptoms typically vision loss, motor weakness or paralysis. The way that this is diagnosed, it's tricky to diagnose. Oftentimes, one of the things that doctors will do is sample the cerebrospinal fluid. And within the CSF, what you might find are a high number of cells that are associated with inflammation. We'll talk about how inflammation plays a real central role to this disease in a minute. So again, what we see is that the cells within the CSF tend to be associated with inflammation. It is difficult to diagnose. So what we'll talk about too is that this disease comes in waves or phases. And so initially there might be a symptom, and that symptom might go away, and it might pop up in some other part of the body. So it is difficult to diagnose and really can only be verifiably diagnosed post-mortem. So like I mentioned, right, it says the loss of the myelin sheath. And the reason that the myelin sheath goes away or breaks down is because the oligodendrocytes, right, the cells in the central nervous system that make myelin and wrap the axons in myelin, those cells die. So the oligodendrocytes die. What we've come to appreciate now, probably that we didn't always appreciate, is that it's not just a loss of myelin, but this disease also involves substantial axon degradation, that the axon it doesn't die per se, but it degenerates. And so we think that this has something to do with the oligodendrocytes dying off. So this axonal degeneration while the causes remain debated, there are a couple of ideas related to oligodendrocytes. Right? One, it would be that the myelin that overlays the axon triggers this inflammatory response. So potentially the axon degrades because of the inflammation that's present. So inflammation nearby structures. The other thought is that the oligodendrocytes are providing some sort of substance, some nourishment, trophic factors. Right? Trophic means, the word trophic, T-R-O-P-H-I-C, means to nourish. And this will come up in amyotrophic lateral sclerosis as well. So trophic factors nourish, and the thought is that these oligodendrocytes, now that they're degenerated, don't release those trophic factors anymore. So really the hallmark of MS is both demyelination and axonal degeneration. I think both of those are important. The cause of this disease remains unknown. We'll talk about the cause significantly here. What we do know is that immune activity is involved, that the immune system is involved. So question mark for cause, but we know, immune system. and it's thought to be autoimmune. So this means that it's not some sort of outside presence that's being attacked by the immune system, or this bacteria is attacking the oligodendrocytes, and that the immune system is then attacking the bacteria. Instead, right, it's autoimmune, which means that the immune system is basically attacking the body in some way. We know this is to be true, or we think that this is true, because we have a line of evidence where we can take myelin proteins and inoculate animals with the proteins that we find in myelin. So if we take a mouse and inject it with myelin proteins, so myelin is mostly fatty, but there are proteins that are associated with it. What we see is the animal's immune response leads to a disease that looks a lot like MS. And so the result here is that the animal develops a disease called EAE, and I don't remember what it stands for. But this looks a lot like MS. With respect to some of the motor deficiencies, right? So the idea is we can purify proteins that are found within myelin, inject those proteins into the animal, and rather than the animal having its immune system attack only those proteins, right? Not only does it attack these proteins that we inject, but it attacks its own myelin after this, okay? So we can see that the mouse's body is attacking its own proteins as well. One of the newest ideas with respect to what causes MS has to do with this protein called contactin 2. The contactin 2 protein is found on glia and axons. Right, so within glial membranes and at the nodes, those nodes of Ranvier. And so I think this is a good place to pause, and we'll come back in the next video and discuss how or why contactin 2 is implicated in the development of MS.